I uh, I am Pastor Mike, one of the leaders here at Awaken. If you're a guest with us, we don't show, what do you call them? Nacho Libre? Yeah? I actually tried to sit down one time and watch that movie. And I was sitting with some family, and I don't know, 10 minutes in the movie, they said, "Are you watching this?" I said, not really. They said, "Do you care if we change it?" I said, "Yeah, I'm not finding it very funny." They said, "Well, you're sitting over there laughing." I said, "Well, I'm trying to laugh to get into the movie." Yeah. Any of you guys ever watched that movie before? A couple of you. Was it funny? Or did you have to do what I did and try to laugh to get into it? Yeah, anyways. We're excited, as Jeff said. There's a lot of cool things happening here at Awaken. We just went through a process called Reawaken 2016, and many of you have given pledges for that as we look to plant a new church in Portsmouth over the next 2 years, and as we look to add some staff and some of those kind of things, leadership development. If by chance you missed that last week, we would encourage you. It's not too late to jump in and be a part of that, and you'll find more stuff in your program about that. But I have actually a question. There's things that change over time, right? Think about it for a minute. How many of you grew up as a child of the 80s? Any children of the 80s? 70s? Some 70s, some 80s. Any children of the 90s? Yeah. I kind of was one of those kids that kind of bridged that gap between the 80s and 90s. So my generation brought Bill Clinton. We try to stay apolitical here, but my generation was kind of, Bill Clinton was a part of that. Also, my generation saw some other interesting things. I actually wrote it down here. The invention of grunge. How many of you guys like grunge music? Remember Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Candlestick, right? Yeah. That was my generation. You're very welcome. So we had great leadership and great music. But there's a lot of things that have changed between the last 20 plus years. And I want to show you a couple things that have changed. Can we pull up that first slide? So I remember my grandma having a rotary phone. Anybody have rotary phones in your house? You make a missed dial, count on taking 5 more minutes to make that phone call, right? Now we have iPhones, right? How many of you guys have iPhones? Most of you, maybe 2 of you have the lesser version called an Android. Yeah. Some of you guys even walk around with flip phones and Blackberries, whatever you call those things. But it is what it is. But a lot has changed when we look at making phone calls, right? There's something else that has changed over the last 15, 20 years. Can we pull the next one up? Computers. How many of you guys remember that annoying sound? Yeah, right? I know, me too. I remember my first computer. Yeah, and that's what it did, didn't it? It got really annoying. You're trying to surf the internet, and all you hear is... But I remember my first computer looked something very similar to that, right? Anybody else, your first computer? Now we walk around with iPads, and we walk around with computers in our pockets, right? So a lot has changed in that realm as well. What about the next one? A lot has changed in our TV shows, hasn't it? Right, in our movies? All the way from the Hoff. And come on, some of you guys were big Hoff fans back in the day. I know it. And now Hollywood has Fast and the Furious number 78. I don't know how many you can make of a fast car, but they're working on it. So our TV shows have changed some, right? I actually sat down and tried to watch some Knight Rider on Netflix about a month ago. The acting really wasn't that great. But the next slide. Our music has changed, hasn't it? I remember Guns N' Roses. My kids are going to remember One Direction. I feel really bad for my kids. I will say this, though. These guys will take these guys any day of the week. Right? That's right. Yeah. Even though Axel's probably in an insane asylum right now. But that is my generation, isn't it? And some of you, that is your generation. But a lot of things have changed over the last 15, 20 years when I was growing up as a kid and now today. But one of the things that I want us to talk about over the next few weeks, we're beginning a new series called Follow Me. And one of the things that does not change is what it means to follow Christ, what it means to follow Jesus. And Jesus gave that simple command, follow me. And I want us to dissect that over the next few weeks because we have a tendency to complicate it, don't we? And we have a tendency as the church to add so many different things into the mix where when you ask somebody, what does it mean to follow Jesus, you get all kinds of different answers, don't we? It's almost like asking David Hasselhoff a question today, isn't it? All kinds of different answers. You never know what he's going to say. So I want us over the next few weeks to, in a sense, uncomplicate what we have complicated. To do that, I need 3 volunteers. Can I have 3 volunteers? You guys are going to help me today, okay? We're going to have some fun. I need 3 volunteers. Don't be afraid. You will survive. John, yeah, once you come up, I can't really see. Yeah, come on up. Okay, one more. Give me another adult. Come on. Lonnie, yeah, come on up. This will be a lot of fun. Oh, you can come up, Carol. Come on. We can have 4. So you guys go ahead and stand up in a line. I'm going to get out of the way. Can you guys give these guys a round of applause? These are either 4 brave souls or they've not been here long enough to know not to volunteer for anything I ask volunteers for. Either way, we're going to have some fun. One of the games that we think that following Jesus is like Jesus says, okay? So we think about it like Simon Says, okay? And so we're going to play a quick game of Simon Says. Does that sound fun? Did you guys play Simon Says? Yeah? Okay, you guys know how it works? So if I say Simon says to clap, what do you do? Oh, that was lame. Really? Come on. Help these guys out. What happens? Simon says clap. All right. Simon says to say the Redskins are a perennial loser. Yeah, okay, there we go. Yeah, there we go. All right, yeah. Simon says to say the Browns are going to return. I'm a Browns fan. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Come on, give them a... These guys weren't very good at Simon Says, were they? Okay, Simon says to dance. Look at that. There you go. That's awesome. Okay, stop. That means you're supposed to keep dancing, right? Yeah, there we go. Jump. Oh, almost got this one. All right, you guys can take a seat. Simon says take a seat. That was awesome. Yeah, there we go. We have a tendency to think that what it means to follow Jesus is this simple game of Jesus says, right? You know, Jesus says go over there, so we got to go over there. Jesus says don't do this, so we better not do that. Jesus says don't look over there, so we better not look over there, right? And so that phrase in the, I don't even remember when it was because I didn't grow up in the church, but WWJD, what would Jesus do? You know, that's that same idea. Jesus says do this, so do this. And then that means you know and follow Jesus, right? Well, the Bible doesn't say anything about that. Would you believe that? That is one of the things that the church has done to complicate, if you will, what it means to follow Jesus. And I want to show you, if you turn to Matthew 9, is where we're going to spend this morning. Matthew 9. If you're a guest with us, those of you that have been here for a while know that we have those verses on a smartphone app that your program will tell you how to log into, or you can follow those verses on the screen here as well. As you turn there, I want to challenge you over the next few weeks to read through 3 books of the Bible. And you read through them pretty fast. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. I want you, many people, as we lead into the Easter season, will take and they'll set aside a certain period of time. Some people call it Lent. Some people begin that process on Ash Wednesday, which actually is not 40 days before Easter, but I want to challenge you, as we are 3 weeks away from Easter, to take those 3 weeks and read through those 3 books, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. You can do that when you get up in the morning, before you go to bed, during your lunch hour. I would recommend not reading it on your way to work, unless you can listen to it. That's another option. But I would encourage you to read through those 3 books, because what you're going to find as you read through those 3 books is following Jesus is less about what Jesus says to do, and it's more about a relationship. It's about an intentional relationship. As you read through those 3 books, you're going to see Jesus compare himself to a father. So it's going to say that God is a father. And I know that for some of you that brings up maybe this really bad illustration in your mind, but Jesus is saying it's not that kind of father. It's a father that loves you, that walks with you, that leads you, that adores you. As you read through those 3 books, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, you're going to see that Jesus compares, we are a branch and he is a vine. And he says that it's through that vine that he gives life. And he gives breath. He gives everything we need to grow. Just like a vine gives every nutrient a branch needs to grow. It's a relationship. You're going to see that he gives an example of a sheep to a shepherd. And I know that for today's culture, that's probably a bad example. Thank you. Yes, I needed that. I told you we're going to be active today, okay? But it's a bad example because many of us don't understand what even a sheep or a shepherd does, right? But back in the day, during Jesus' day, everybody understood that a sheep was a dumb animal. And a sheep needed somebody to walk with them, to guide them, to feed them, to protect them. And so Jesus is saying that we, in essence, are dumb animals in a sense, right? Don't we need somebody to often lead us, direct us, help us understand, right? Look at, last week we talked about babies. Look at babies. Look at children. I've got 4. They're up for lease if you want to borrow a child. But we need to lead them, to guide them, to nurture them, to raise them, right? Just as we need God to lead us, to guide us, to nurture us, to raise us. And so as we look at what it means to follow Jesus, I want you to understand that it's less about a game of Simon Says, and it's more about an intentional relationship. And that's what I want you to see in this passage in Matthew chapter 9, starting in verse 9. It says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. And Jesus looks at him, and he doesn't say, do this or do that, or make sure you don't look over there, Matthew. He says what to him? Follow me. And Matthew got up and followed him. Now, something I want you to understand. Matthew was not a really cool dude, okay? Matthew was what was called a tax collector. How many of you guys have filed your taxes already? I started looking at my taxes last night and was like, yeah, anybody have that reaction looking at your taxes? Well, picture Matthew showing up at your door. He was a tax collector, and so when he would show up at your door, knock, 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 he would want taxes. And so many of the people were like, oh. And so Matthew shows up, and the way that Rome did their taxes was they would allow somebody to bid for a region. And so Matthew must have been the guy that bidded the highest for that region, so he paid the most to Rome in order to collect taxes in that area. And so he was allowed to collect whatever he wanted to collect. Wouldn't you love that? The government allowed to collect whatever that guy says they could collect. And so he collected whatever he wanted. Rome got a certain percentage, But Matthew, whatever above that percentage Matthew could collect, guess where it went? In his pocket. So think about it. Jesus is walking down the road. And at that time, he didn't have 12 disciples. He was just kind of collecting this kind of ragtag group. Okay? So he was a rabbi. He was a teacher. And he was collecting this ragtag group. Think of Matthew as today's modern-day drug dealer. You know, think of the drug dealer that hangs out in behind the 7-Eleven, and when a middle school kid goes to get candy after school, the drug dealer comes out from around the corner and says, "Hey, I got something else." What would that make you do to that drug dealer? That is the same equivalent to a guy like Matthew. But Jesus walks up to him and he says, "Hey, follow me." And there's a lot of things that Jesus could have said to him, right? Think about it. "Man, Matthew, your mom must be really proud." Right? Or he could have looked at Matthew and he could have said, "Wow, you've really made good for yourself, Matthew. Everybody's going to be really impressed at the reunion." That was Matthew. I picture Jesus walking up to Matthew and say, "Hey, why don't you come with us?" I picture Peter in the back saying, whoa, wait a minute. "Jesus, I know this other guy that will probably be a much better fit." I picture Simon. Now, who was Simon? He was a modern-day terrorist. Okay? He was Simon the Zealot. Okay? Zealot. He was a modern-day terrorist. He hated who? He hated the Roman government. So think about it. Jesus walks up to Matthew and says, "Hey, Mr. Roman government, why don't you come be a part of the team?" What do you think Simon's doing? He's ready to draw down on the guy. I mean, Jesus is not picking the people that would be at the front of the class. You know, these are not the people that would be first to be picked in kickball, right? And Jesus walks up and he doesn't tell him what to do, what to say, how to look, how to behave, what to believe. He just simply says what? What's he say? Follow me. So it continues. It says, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. I want you to understand something here. God was most comfortable with those who looked the least like him. Capture that for a minute. It says that Jesus is sitting in this room over at Matthew's house. Who does Matthew go get? The rest of the drug dealers from the neighborhood. They're sitting there and they're having what? They're having dinner. They're having some drinks. They're having a party. And Jesus was more comfortable with those that looked the least like him. And Jesus, when he went, did not tell people how to believe or how to behave. He basically told them, he said, "I will identify with you if you identify with me." Write that down. I will identify with you if you identify with me. That's profound. That's not Jesus saying this big game, cosmic game of Jesus says. That is Jesus saying, "I will identify with you if you identify with me." And so they're sitting there. They're having this party, and this ragtag group is sitting there. And I want you to catch this for a minute, because many of us, some of us maybe have grown up in the church. You were born on the altar. The pastor came up, splashed you with some water, and said, "You will be blessed." That is some of your story. Not my story, but that's some of your story. Some of you know exactly all these different things in Scripture. You know, like I say Matthew 4, you're like Jesus' temptation. And you can go through that whole list and how it points to the future of Scripture. Some of you are sitting here, you know a huge theological word like anthropomorphism. Say that 5 times fast. But some of you may be sitting here, and you may be the person that walked in saying, you know what? I don't know if I could walk into a church building and the walls might fall down on me. So you came here because you're like, at least it's a theater. So, and that's what I love about what God is doing here. Many of us come from all these different places. But it's all for the single call that Jesus places. And it wasn't this giant cosmic game of Jesus says. It was a simple thing that he said, follow me. Matthew, follow me. And so picture this. Again, this room full of people that are having a great time. They look totally opposite from Jesus. All right? Because again, God was most comfortable with those that looked the least like him. And they're sitting there. But as we read on, you're going to see that the religious people had a really hard time with that. They had a really difficult time. Because many of us have this false idea that I've got to make this climb toward God, right? I've got to try to earn this way to God. And so I've got to do certain things and say certain things and act a certain way. You know, like for example, some of us may say, man, I've done drugs in my life. Well, guess what? That's 2 steps back. Or some of us may say, man, I cheated on that test. That's a half step back, by the way. Some of us may say, man, I was really nice to that elderly lady because I held the door for her this weekend. Guess what? You get to move a step forward. Good job. Good job. Give yourself a pat on the back. Yeah, there you go. Some of you may say, man, you know what? I tend to drink a little too much. If you're Presbyterian, that's 2 steps forward, by the way. If you're Baptist, forget it. It's all over. You're done, right? You're out of the program. But that's the way we think, isn't it? We think that we have to climb this way to God. And Jesus doesn't say anything about acting a certain way. What does he tell us? What did he tell Matthew? Follow me. Follow me. Take a look at this. It continues on. In verse 11, it says, when the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? I want you to catch this. This is fantastic. Verse 12. On hearing this, Jesus said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. All right, stop there for a minute. It's easy to read that, but it's harder to put that into context. Again, put yourself there. You're sitting in a party. You're eating this good food. I don't know, maybe Matthew knew how to make some mean ribs. I don't know. Threw some lamb on the grill. They're sitting there, they're having a great time. The religious people, we'll just call them church people, okay? Start asking questions. Why are we here? Aren't we going to tell them what they're supposed to do and what they're supposed to believe? And what is Jesus' answer? It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but it's the sick. Now think about this for a minute. You're Matthew, okay? You just let this man, Jesus, come into your house. You're sitting there, you're hearing this conversation, okay? You're hearing this conversation about why are we letting these people act this way, okay? And Jesus says what? He says, Matthew and his buddies are sick. All right, woohoo, loopy. All right, something off, something's not right. Think about it. If you're Matthew, I just picture this real long, awkward pause, okay? Remember, you've got this room full of ragtag people. You got Matthew and his drug-dealing friends from down the street. And now you've got Simon sitting there who's a zealot, who's the terrorist, okay? Simon the terrorist. And he would like nothing more than to gut Matthew because what he represents is Roman government, okay? And so then you got Peter sitting there, and what did Peter always do? Always put his foot in his mouth. And so I'm picturing this scene. Jesus says, yeah, these people really need a doctor. They're pretty screwed up. And I picture Matthew and his buddies sitting there for a minute, and Jesus was bold enough to say this, right? Would you be bold enough to say that? Jesus was bold enough to say, yeah, these people are off a little bit. And so I picture Matthew and his buddies sitting there for a minute, thinking this through, processing. Peter just wanting to say something to like ease the tension in the room. And then Simon is getting ready to pull his sword and gut somebody. And then what does Matthew and his buddies do? I think they just start laughing. Yeah, you're right, we're pretty sick. Yeah, what we do is probably not really cool, is it? Selling drugs to the little teenagers, that's probably not good, is it? Yeah, we do have some problems, don't we? You picture that taking place? That is exactly what's going on in that room. Jesus is not saying, hey, Matthew, do this and believe this. He's just telling these guys to what? Follow me. And then when it comes obvious that there's something off, he says, yeah, there probably is something a little off with these guys, but that's kind of why I'm hanging out with them. I want to kind of help them see some things. Do you guys see that? And we, though, as a church, the church, churches are known for this, to sit there and tell Matthew, dude, you need to do this, and you need to stop this, and you better start believing this. But instead, Jesus just says, man, these guys are sick. And you guys start high-fiving each other saying, yeah, we're pretty sick. I remember we talked about 15, 20 years ago growing up, and I remember a catchphrase that was really popular then. And it was that phrase, dude, you're sick. Do you guys remember that? Anybody? Maybe just North Ohio. Okay, a couple of you remember it. We would look at each other and say, dude, you're pretty sick. What did that mean? That means you're pretty cool, right? And so we have these catchphrases that kind of pass through time. If you're a mom, probably one of your catchphrases, like my wife's, is, why doesn't anybody ever listen to me? Haven't you guys heard that before? How many of you guys have said that? Why doesn't anybody ever listen to me? Yeah? Does that ring true, ladies? Yeah, okay. We have some honest, bold people here. Good. Catchphrases. We have a catchphrase here at Awaken, and it's called living the gospel in community. And all that means is that simple thing. Jesus said, follow me. And so we follow Jesus in community because we believe that as we follow, we change. As we follow, we get a bigger glimpse of who God is, and it starts changing us. And so one of our catchphrases is living the gospel in community. And that's done through our community groups, as Jeff mentioned earlier. I thought it would be fun to think through some catchphrases. I'm going to say a catchphrase. You guys tell me where it came from. Can we do that? Yeah, okay, good. Cowabunga, dude. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There we go. Good. Phineas and Ferb. How about this? I'll be back. Oh, yeah, there you go. What about come on down, the Price is Right. Some of you guys still watch The Price is Right, don't you? I remember my grandma watching The Price is Right with her rotary phone and her... That was even before computers. What about this one? Pull up those pants. I did that? Yeah, you guys are good at this. Let's see. All right, what about this? What you talking about, Willis? Okay. Oh, here's a good one. We're going to separate the ladies from the men with this one. How rude. Full House, yeah. How many of you guys watched TGIF? Yeah, that was like your parents growing up was TGIF, huh? Yeah, your parents needed a timeout. They said, here, sit and watch TGIF. So what's his name? Bob Saget raised you, didn't he? That's right. That's right. What about this? Here, this was a good movie. Never Feed Him After Midnight. The Gremlins, yeah. This was one of my favorite shows growing up. Zoinks! Oh, there we go. And here's the last one. This was like the redneck of the crew. No, he Dukes of Hazzard. I used to like that show. That car was awesome. He'd walk around, he'd go, oh! No. He had a big 2x4. Oh! Yes! There we go. Yes! Now that we just picked out all the rednecks in the group. All right, that was fun. Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Yeah, some of you guys watched it. You just didn't want to admit it. But the catchphrases, right? You know, they're sitting in that room and they say, yeah, they're pretty sick. They're messed up. Jesus had a catchphrase, and that's a catchphrase we're looking at all through this series. What was that catchphrase? Follow me. Following Jesus, if we just focus on that idea of following forces me to focus on where I am rather than where I'm not. Think about that. Following Jesus causes me to focus on where I am rather than where I'm not. When we start playing the game of Jesus says, we start focusing on where I'm not as opposed to where I am. And Jesus was about asking people to follow him to focus on where they're at currently. Where are they at currently? He said, identify with me and I will identify with you. You know, think about it in terms of a marriage relationship. How many of you would prefer to be in a marriage relationship where you knew that your spouse hated you, despised you, but they followed every marriage rule there was? Is that a healthy marriage? Absolutely not. As opposed to being in a marriage relationship where you knew that your spouse loved you, adored you, would do anything for you, but maybe messed up on a few things here and there. How many of you would rather be in that relationship? Absolutely, because you know that that person loves you and will do anything for you. And that's the same thing as what it means to follow Jesus. Jesus is not sitting there with his checklist saying, yeah, you can take a step forward or you can take 3 steps back. Jesus is sitting there and he's saying, I just want to know you. I just want you to know me. Just follow me for a little while. Now, I promise you that as we follow Jesus, don't be surprised if at some point you look in the mirror and you start to look a little bit different. You wake up one day and you realize you think a little bit different. Not because you're playing this huge game of Jesus says, not because somebody is telling you, act this way, do this stuff, believe this way, but because you're simply getting up each day and you're making that statement. You're saying, Jesus, I just want to follow you today. I just want to understand a little bit more of who you are as a God of the universe. I just want to understand a little bit more of how you see me, how you want to know me, maybe how you want to lead me today. Where are you going today? Verse 13, Jesus continues that statement. It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. And he says, but go and learn what this means. Catch this. He says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but to call the sinner. Not to call those that have it all together, but to call those that don't have it all together. Jesus came to those who believe the right things and behave the right ways, to call those that did not believe the right things and behave the right ways. You see, that statement that Jesus uses there is actually from an Old Testament scripture. And the religious people of the day, the church people, if you will, of the day, they live by that if I sacrifice enough, if I do enough, if I believe enough, then I will know who God is. And Jesus says, no, wipe that away. Forget that. That is not what this is all about. Jesus says, don't worry about what you believe. I mean, look at his disciples. Who was Thomas? What was his nickname? Doubting Thomas, right? So he probably did not believe everything that was taught in the scripture. You look at Simon. He was a crazy terrorist. Did he probably behave the right way? Then he calls Matthew and says, hey, Matthew, why don't you come be a part of the group? We need a center fielder. And so Matthew comes, and who's he bring? All his drug dealing friends. Do you think they behaved a certain way? I doubt it. Let me say this. If you have ever been in a place where you felt like the church looked at you a certain way, judged you a certain way, looked down on you for a certain thing, let me say it's not your fault, it's the church's. And I apologize that ever happened to you. We pray that Awaken is a place that you feel comfortable coming to simply follow Jesus. Some of you may be at the beginning of that. And so you may be bringing some of that stuff with you, like stuff that you read through the Bible, and you're like, yeah, I probably don't believe certain things, and I probably don't behave certain ways. Let me tell you, I don't care. I just want you to each day wake up and say, Jesus, I just want to know you a little bit more today. Some of you may have been following for a long time, and we may even allow some of those things to creep in that really are not a part of what it means to follow Jesus. But let me say this, don't be surprised as you follow Jesus if he changes you. You wake up one day, like I said, you look in the mirror and you look a little bit different. You see the world a little bit different. And all that means is you're starting to see things through God's eyes. That's why Jesus looked and he said, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire us to just love one another. We're going to talk about that next week as we spell this out a little bit more, what it means to follow Jesus. He's saying, I want us to sit here and, like Matthew and his buddies, admit that, yeah, we probably have a problem. But to know that God is comfortable with us being in his presence if we can admit that I have a problem. And God is going to lead us on a journey where over time he changes and he tweaks and he molds. But it's all about relationship. It's not about this list of things that we're supposed to do like this giant cosmic game of Jesus says. The more conscious I am of the work God has left to do in me, the less critical I am of the work that God still has to do in you. The more conscious I am of the work that God still has to do in me, the less critical I am of the work that God still has to do in you. So I pray that through this series we understand that following Jesus is less about behaving a certain way is less about believing certain things. And it's more about waking up and saying, Jesus, I just want to follow you, and I want to know you. I want to have relationship with you. I want to understand you. I mean, God's kind of hard to understand at times, right? And I think that that is what Jesus was calling Matthew to. If you, as we close here, the band's going to come up. If you look in Matthew 4, verse 19. Jesus was calling some other disciples. He told them, he said, come follow me. And then he says, I will make you fishers of men. He didn't say, go out and bring others to me. He said, over time, you're going to see how I change you. You're going to start seeing things through my eyes. And that's going to cause you to want to invite others to say, hey, come follow with me. There's something going on here that I think you're going to want to see. And so the challenge today, as we lead into Easter, the challenge today, first of all, I just want you to do an experiment and say, Jesus, I just want to follow you for the next 3 weeks. Read through Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Ask God to speak to you, to show you who he really is. Not what you've been told all your life or not what you think you've believed all your life. Throw all that in the trash. And just say, God, I want you to show me what does it mean to follow you. Not believe certain things or behave certain ways. But God, what does it mean to follow you? Show me that relationship. Help me to better understand. Those of you that are here and you are following Jesus, I want to challenge you to what Jesus says. He says, I will make you fishers of men. Basically what he's saying is, I will use you to draw other men to me. I will use you to show others the work that I'm doing in you, the relationship that we have, and the life that I want to give. And so if you look in your program, you'll see little business-sized cards. And there's 5 numbers there, 1 through 5. I want you to pray and ask God, God, who do you want me to share your love with? That might be through a simple email. That might be a phone call, checking in, see how you're doing. That might be an invite to come to this series or maybe to come to Easter. But before you leave today, I want you to write down names of 5 people that God has laid on you to be able to share with them over time. Simple message. It's not about what we do or what we believe. God works all that out. But it's making that step and saying, I just want to follow you today and know you today. Can we do that? Can we let God challenge us and use us to share that with others?